and I truly love and respect the Celebrate Recovery program.
Hi, Tammy.
So, I'd like to tell you a story about how my life got turned upside down. The story starts at the end of 2017 in September. My boys were starting a new school year, and there was a new principal that year. My boys were already a week into missing school. The principal wanted to schedule an appointment with me to see how things might have worked out for my family this new school year. I remember it was a Tuesday. Our conversation basically boiled down to her stating that she was the new person that I was filling in. My first initial thoughts were, well, that's a verbal blow to everything I thought I was back then. I felt the spirit of slap rise up within me. I was so mad because by this point, all I've ever encountered was being in situations where people were approaching me and my family with a 50-foot pole, saying things like, I am not qualified to help you. She probably saw me starting to seethe with anger because she quickly started to mention that it sounded like I've done everything I should have or could have done. Then she asked me if I've ever thought about moving. Instantly, my blood ran cold. I had cold beads of sweat seeping from my brow. I've never been to war with bullets and guns, but I've been to war between perspectives for the majority of my life. This woman did not know me. She had no idea of the past that was always snapping at my heels. Within this conversation, I remembered that one of my brothers was planning on moving to Peace River for work. He was expecting a baby in a few short months. I thought, okay, that's a good reason to move. I can help him, and then everything else will fall into place. I'll work things out when I get there. God, please be with me because you're all I've got. I have always seemed to be like a living but petrified person. I had a belief that I was and always will be nothing. I had no power because I didn't allow myself to have power. I always joked about myself as being the best drill sergeant, jellyfish mom ever. Yeah, it was no flip-floppy. I would work so hard to set things straight, keeping my cool and making sure my boys hit the mark that I set out for them. And also keeping myself accountable because I am the example. In these moments of redirection, I would think about my favorite childhood stories. The tin soldier who would stay steadfast in the face of affliction. And also Genesis 32:22-32. Ever since I was a kid, I would think about this story. I wondered if I could ever be whole and strong enough to face God like this one day. I'm telling you that my brain can stay like this for about a month. Then I would be so mentally, emotionally, and most of all, spiritually exhausted. Because fun is what I do. Being so strict and following rules is hard for me to do sometimes. I am intentionally leaving out some critical factors because I want to give my personal experiences without laying out parts of my story that I haven't dealt with properly yet. So with that, I will tell you this was a cycle that I did not really accept until I stepped back. All I really want to say is that my siblings and I are like islands unto ourselves, and I'm considered the weakest link. Not my perspective any longer. Amen. Okay, so it was a Tuesday that I had that discussion with the principal. On Friday, I was living in Peace River Women's Shelter. Everything that was worth anything I sold for small dollars because I needed it gone. The special things to me I stored at a friend's house until I can get them again. I was smarter this time and kept a small set of dishes because starting over sucks and I needed a decent foundation this time. Everything else I threw away to the dump. I broke my broom in half because when I was a kid, Because when I was a kid, someone told me to never take an old broom to a new home. Because old broom, old problems, versus new broom, new problems. And I was so done with old problems. I thought my foundation was okay when I was living in Grand Prairie, but reflecting back, I can tell that it was mostly a sand and palm leaves hut. I had to leave everything I knew behind and go somewhere that I was scared of. Part of my childhood I lived here. I was trembling with fear that first drive. Me and my boys and whatever junk I had with me, I literally had to stop at Dunvegan Bridge and recuperate. I prayed the entire time for God to make a way for me and my boys. I needed community, and the first thing I looked for was CR. I don't think I can ever see my life living without CR. Sadly, there wasn't anything yet. Amen. So instead, I did the next best thing. I went to mental health and spilled my guts. I dealt with the fear that had been lingering over me around the time I spent here as a kid. I knew that this was the only way to rebuild my foundation. I needed a foundation of safety first and foremost, then consistency because I'm a kid at heart. I knew that this was the only, then consistency because I'm a kid at heart. So I managed to deal with a lot of issues within a few short months because I already had so many great tools. I just needed to give myself the permission to take control of my life. I am a codependent person because I know that this is how I needed to be in order to protect myself as a child. I had to grow myself up, but very lovingly and very sweetly, because before this point, I was still so inwardly aggressive with myself. I hated everything about myself, because I was carrying around the perspectives of my family with me. Looking back, I believe that moving here was the smartest move I have ever made as an adult. I managed to stay at the women's shelter for as long as I could. I think it was just under 3 months. I needed to be around normal because I felt like anything but normal. I love movies because they're amazing examples of life. They're amazing examples of life without having to own anything. I thought about the movie Eat, Pray, Love. Living at the women's shelter, there was a professional camp cook working there. Wow, could this lady cook? I am so embarrassed to say that I gained an astronomical amount of weight when I stayed in this very safe and loving environment. This set me on a very deep downward spiral to some of the deepest depression I've ever felt. Let's just say that I forgot to pray and love. My boys, they were so angry with life and they were super angry with me. I was on autopilot again and it was heavy. I just went along with the same kinds of actions that I've always known, smoothing things over and trying to gain love from my boys because I knew they deserved to have things that others take for granted. In the past, as a little boy, my older son would try to bargain with me that if he cleaned up the whole house, could I go find him a daddy? My son, I wish it was that simple, because I'd pick a nice ripe one. Right? My younger son was always deep in thought. I would catch him in a daydream-like state a lot of the time. I was terrified that I was never going to reach him. Now, living in Peace River, I uprooted us because life was unmanageable, and my older son was trying to rise above poverty by doing what most underprivileged boys do. He was finding a community that was leading him to death. I specifically asked him that if he fell off the face of the earth, would anyone come looking for him? He answered no. Okay, kid, you're falling so far off the radar. I knew that I would have to be stronger than I've ever been before. Things were looking up for once. I found a very small 2-bedroom apartment in November of 2017. And things were feeling so nice again. I didn't believe that I was ever going to feel true joy again, but I pushed forward. At this point, I had only very little interaction with the brother that I followed. After my boys and I moved, things were shaky. We weren't together, making plans for the future, school, football, friends. And before I knew it, I was revolving my life around my brother and his family. I was responsible to watch out for his girlfriend when he was out working. I don't really know what went wrong. My boys started challenging me by asking me why we moved here. Was it for them or was it for us? My babes, it was for us. So I found my backbone and told my brother, I can't live his life because I have my own life to live. I had very good intentions, but my dang guilt always clouds my judgment. In my family, I am the oldest sibling and the only girl. So responsibility was mine to yield for life. Things happened. Autopilot, don't fail me now. Then one day in 2018, I had two of my brothers living in my super small 2-bedroom apartment. My way of everything was always wrong, and I was always publicly reprimanded in front of my children their whole life up to this point. Fighting narcissism runs deep within the roots of my past. I don't remember when it happened, but the memory is still so vividly playing sometimes. My brothers came to my work to tell me how wrong I am, talking ever so loudly that my way of doing everything is wrong. I thought they were getting ready to tell me they were moving out. I said, okay, so you're leaving today, right? They responded with, no, we need to stay for 2 more months and save money. I wanted to Hulk rage right then and there. Then, the next day, I got a call from work. My younger son, he squeezed out the words, come home now. I said, what? He said, Mom. I reassured him that I'm on my way. Pulling up. My brothers were taking all of their things back to their big house in Grimshaw. My brother was covered in blood. I died a little bit. My son told me I did not throw a single punch, but I purposely put my blood on him and asked him if he was happy now. My poor son demented for the first time. See, I've never been to war with bullets and guns, but I've been to war with perspectives for the majority of my life. My son was the grenade, my brother was the pin, and I tried with everything I was made of to cover my son with protection. I reached out like never before, and as before, we were told that nobody in Peace River was qualified to help. I died a little bit again. Mark 5:21-34. I like to think about the lady that reached out for the hem of Jesus' robe. I was in denial and I couldn't stop the cycle of fighting and defending myself. I was feeling lost. Sorry. Goodness. I was feeling lost and alone, especially in the crowds of people I would find myself in. Well, actually, the only crowd I've ever tried to fit in, the only group I've ever tried to fit in was the one I was born to. Then I recognized that ugly cycle for real this time. But for some reason, in December of 2018, I let my dad stay with me. I have always had a permanent residence for long periods of time. Things happened, and my son was struck into another spout of regression. This time the scales were trampled to nothing. My son, he was truly lost in his mind for a short amount of time. That's when my son's psychiatrist realized I was living the hell I tried to tell him about. In my family, schizophrenia and other mental health issues are prevalent. I saw it happening right before my eyes. Our brains get so bent out of shape by something tragic, but in order to get the world right again, we need to be. But in order to get the world right again, we need to be able to ever so gently, ever so lovingly bend our brains back to before the incident. Nothing is ever going to be the same because things will be better because of the hard lessons learned. I'm telling you that I was screaming there was an iceberg for years and nobody heard me. Then my voice went to Red Deer. Someone heard me. There, they were finally able to be distinguished as being separate people. Amen. They both grew and had real-life experiences for the first time in their lives. I traveled to see them as often as I could. I went down 7 times. The first 3 times I went, I slept in my vehicle. I didn't have to because CFS were supposed to help, but they chose not to notice whenever I mentioned that I was going down. Another reason I did this was to prove to my children that come hell or high water, I will be there. Now, you guys, my life is like a dream, but it's a real life. My son has been taking his medication properly. I'm not saying life is easy. I'm saying that things are much more manageable than they have ever been in my life as a mother and as an individual. I now know that the next steps will be me facing the fact that my children felt and still feel abandoned by me. Because I did not give myself permission to be a real person. My children are treated with the same perspectives. They were always backseat to my supposed responsibilities. I want this story to be about grabbing power back up. Feeling sad is okay, but only for a moment. Because being sad will only set me back into autopilot, and I'm way happier driving my own car. I have a voice and I matter. Amen.